Hello art friends and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to explore a powerful tool for realistic watercolor painting, doing a graphite study and a watercolor study of the same subject. This practice has helped me immensely improve my realistic watercolor painting, understanding tonal values, form, and take color study to the next level. Now let's take a stroll into my garden and find the perfect subject for this practice. When I look for a subject, I want to find something interesting, something with life. But if this is your first time doing this practice, I would recommend some really basic leaf. I found this Hosta leaves and I like the movement. They are twisted, curved. This leaf will stand beautifully as an individual subject for painting and the tonal study. Now back at my studio with references, and I need to make a reference photo. I always have my light coming from left side and I take a lot of references so I can choose from. And when I made a reference, I need to make it black and white for the first graphite practice. Now all phones have this option to make a photo into black and white photo. I would like to show you some results from previous basic practice I did, and all these tutorials are available on my Patreon. The very basic green leaf practice, rose practice, and rose in watercolors is done only using one pigment. Then I did leaf study, more complex composition in watercolors and in graphite, and another leaf with a little tick from my son. But all these practices are super valuable for realistic watercolor painting. Back to Hosta. First, tonal value study using graphite pencils. Towards the end I will be taking also black colored pencil for greater contrast, but for now I'm starting with F pencil, which is in the middle. You can also use H or HB or B for this first layer of graphite. I'm applying to the whole surface of this Hosta leaf, only skipping the lightest parts, leaving them white as it is paper, and adding tonal value a little bit later. First I'm going over those darker spots and middle value spots, carefully, not pushing pencil too hard, lightly applying first layer, and I'm doing this on hot pressed Fabriano 300 GSM paper, which is smooth and receives layers of graphite very nicely. Speeding up the video, showing you the process. Full tutorial is available on my Patreon from the beginning till finishing touches. Let's dive into why this practice is so beneficial. A graphite study allows us to focus purely on the form and value of the subject. It forces us to observe more carefully and make precise decisions about where to apply our lights and darks, without worrying about water ratio, which pigments to take, which watercolors to mix, only value and how to make the subject look realistic. Carefully moving forward, now I'm taking 4B pencil, which is much softer and can be layers applied much darker and contrasty with the light area. I'm applying the upper curved part, which is darker, and I can see that in the reference. Always look in the reference. All the guidances you need are in the reference. Careful observation is a key for realistic watercolor painting, and as it is here for tonal value study. As with watercolors, also with graphite, I'm doing layering with graphite pencils carefully from the more lighter graphite pencil, which is HB, H. Then I move slowly to much softer, which is 2B, 3B and 4B pencils to make even darker layers of graphite. And be careful, don't push too hard your pencil. If you have a good quality paper, this paper can receive many layers of graphite. taking black colored pencil, which will be much darker than any graphite pencil, and I'm adding this colored black pencil to the shadow area, which I see in the reference are the darkest one. When you are adding something dark, don't just go over the whole area, but look carefully in the reference and notice these darker areas. They are not everywhere. They're in specific areas where the subject is going away from light source or is completely covered with something and is in the shadow. Using again pencil F for lighter parts, lighter spots that I see on this hosta leaf, applying very lightly without hard pushing. Shadow area also is visible on the lightest part of this hosta leaf. It's not just white. Take a careful observation of the reference and you will notice. Zoom in closer to that area you are working on. And after some while I have draw with the graphite pencils, I like to stop, take a photo of my work, put it side by side with a reference photo and see how far, what else I need to do, how far I need to go, where contrast should be more, or maybe missing some details, because when there's some time is spent on your work, your eyes are starting to adapt and don't notice some little things that you are already used to seeing. And after you change perspective, like taking a picture and looking in the phone in your work, then you start to notice that you are missing some shadow area, maybe some detail, and it's time to push yourself a little bit further and add those details, add that extra work to your drawing or painting. Applying final details, final layers of some shadow to build even more contrast. And we can compare to the real subject in front of us, which is a nice way to compare something, and can go on to watercolors now. Using the same line drawing on the same paper Fabriano, I did another line drawing, removing excess amount with elastic eraser, mixing watercolors, and we can start painting. My main watercolor mix that I will be using for this hosta leaf is perylene green together with transparent yellow, and I have real subject in front of me. I can compare watercolor mixes, which is a wonderful thing to do. You can experiment with pigments that you already have, mix in front of you, take a real subject, compare, adjust your watercolor mixes, and try again. The best way to learn watercolor mixes is mixing and matching with the real subject in front of you. I quite often receive questions from my followers and students where to begin. Where should I start when we see in front of us this blank space of paper surface and just getting lost? Where to begin? A little bit scared, a little bit unknown how to proceed, and my main suggestion is start from the area that you feel confident. Don't go straight away to the main area, to the most complex area, to the front, the very front beautiful, I don't know, flower petal leaf. As I'm starting here, this little curve on the upper side, I see in the reference that it is much darker than the rest of the hosta leaf, and there are no spots, no super details. I start from there. I feel that is my safe zone where I can start, and I'm using finer tip brush. I'm not applying water before I apply watercolors. These areas between veins are quite small, so I go straight with watercolors, and as I said, I'm using perylene green mixed together with transparent yellow. Try and mix on your own with the pigments you already have in your paint box. No need to run to new art material shop and buy new pigments. It will not save you or your situation. The more you will practice, the better you will become with this. speeding up painting process. Full tutorial is available on my Patreon from the beginning till finishing touches, graphite study and watercolor study 2 tutorials. About watercolor study, we add another layer of complexity, which is color. This is where the previous graphite study comes in handy. Having established our values, we can now focus on the color, preserving the tonal relationships we've established earlier. You already know your subject from the graphite study, where there were no these extra problems, water ratio, watercolors, color tones. You only had to think about how to make it look three-dimensional. Now, as we have more complexity with watercolors, we already did the subject with graphite, so we know the subject, we know where the shadows and light areas are, and maybe we made some mistakes with graphite study. Now we can avoid those mistakes, we can learn from those mistakes in our watercolor study. I'm painting with transparent layers and using finer tip brush to paint around spots that I see in the reference. There are spots that are darker, there are spots that are lighter. For the lighter spots, I'm using transparent yellow, sap green and little tiny touch of alizarin crimson. For the darker spots, I'm using perlin green and transparent yellow. The same as I did with graphite study, I also do with my watercolor study. After I painted some while, I take a photo, stop painting, put it side by side with the reference photo and compare what I need to do more, where I need to put some watercolors, details, extra brush strokes. Everything is done by comparing. I'm adding more contrast to the shadow area, finer brush strokes between the veins to add more, to make those veins even thinner, leaving them somewhere these veins of Hosta leaf are lighter, somewhere they are darker because they are going into the shadow area, adding some spots that I noticed in the reference. And no matter how long I will paint, I will be constantly looking at reference. My eyes are jumping from the reference to my painting in order to compare and to look for information that I can apply into my painting. Now we have real subject and we can compare our watercolor study to real Hosta leaf. Or maybe you did your own watercolor and graphite study of another leaf. Take that leaf with you home, or maybe put it in the refrigerator, it will stay fresh longer, and after you finish you can compare. Make some adjustments, maybe watercolors needs to be applied, like here I'm applying transparent yellow, transparent layer of this pigment to add more yellowish color tone to my painting. Now I have 2 studies of one subject, and this was an amazing opportunity to learn something new. Thank you for watching, consider subscribing, and see you in my next videos and tutorials. Thank you, bye bye.